Well, Liverpool, they used to call it the capital of Ireland. That's one thing. So you'd always be around a lot of music. It's a very musical city. There are certain few. Glasgow, I think, is another. They like the music there, you know. So you had all the kind of old music hall stuff, which was going through my dad's era. You know, my dad used to work on a spotlight in the music halls. And so he got a lot of influence from all of that, you know, all the old music hall acts, which he passed on to me just by playing piano. He used to work on the limelights when it was actually a piece of lime that they burned. They had to trim the piece of lime. And he used to come home after the first house on the music hall, and he'd bring home programs from the first house, and my Auntie Millie would iron them, and he'd take them back for second house and flog them again.
A taste of honey, tasting much sweeter than wine. Do-do-do-do.
I say a lot of the sailors brought, I mean, in Liverpool, you'd know about people like Big Bill Broonzy, Gene Vincent, Bill Haley, Ray Charles, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis, before a lot of people in America knew about it, really. There was the big kind of blues country. There's a huge kind of country following in Liverpool, for instance. Again, I suppose, off the travellers, you know, mainly the sailors. A lot of sailors shipped out of Liverpool. You've got the Irish influence, the old Irish folk music was very like kind of Indian music, you know, it's a very rich thing to draw on, all of that. So put it all together and you kind of find all of my influences in there, you know, from kind of Fred Astaire to Big Bill Broonzy, you know, it's quite a way.
It's the Beatles!
They were scruffy, very scruffy. And even, I can remember as early as in 1959, I think it was the Pictorial, did a feature on the beatnik horrors of England. And it was the Beatles who they picked on in Liverpool. Nobody knows this, but they actually went into the flat in Gambier Terrace where Lennon and Stewart had. And it was spread all over the, all over the country, the beatnik horrors. When I sent them up to Scotland for a promotion, when he arrived, he took one look at them, phoned and said, "What the hell have you sent me up?" We used to sell jam butties, which is, you know, jam sandwich, for those who don't know Liverpool language. And they used to be that hard up that when we made toast, we used to charge an old penny, not the new penny, extra for jam on toast. And when they'd been out on an engagement, they would come back and they must, you know, they'd had to pay a driver to take them over there. So that left them with about £8 between the 5 of them. And they used to have a big argument whether they could afford the jam on the toast. We had a West Indian steel band playing. And, you know, with it being a port, a lot of seafarers used to come into Liverpool. And I think some seamen came along from Hamburg, heard the group, and behind my back made a deal. And next minute, when I went down, there was no steel band. They'd all done a midnight flit to Hamburg. But there were such wonderful characters. When they got to Hamburg, they were having such a good time. They wrote to me and said, "Why don't I come over here and do some business, bring some of the groups over?" And we took a tape recording of the Beatles and hawked the tapes around Hamburg until eventually we found a club called the Kaiserkeller, who we talked them into having an English group.
Oh, ain't she sweet? We'll see you walking down that street. Yes, I ask you very confidentially. Ain't she?
Hamburg must have then been the vice centre of Europe. Every sort of vice and every corruption, you name it, and that was Hamburg. And they were there when they were 17 years old. And of course, all the prostitutes used to make a big play for them, and the transvestites used to try and get them in bed. Well, this naturally turned them into old men, in their mind. They weren't the sweet, innocent kids that Brian Epstein projected them to the public.
It starts off, you know, you're in Hamburg, you're 18, you've never been abroad in your life, and you've got a bit of money in your pocket, and you go drinking on a Saturday night, you know, and you end up on the Sunday morning and you do a couple of loony things like most 18-year-olds or servicemen abroad. You know, there's always some lunacy. And it just grows, you know. Someone remembers the lunacy and they say, oh, do you remember that? It's the old story, you know. And it grows into this amazing legend about, I remember them, they were tough days. But, you know, it wasn't that much different from now. It was a little bit more lunacy, that's all, you know. Quite a bit more lunacy. But, you know, it was only kind of good, clean fun. Good, dirty fun, actually.
He asked his father and myself to listen to a record. He said, forget about the singer, just listen to the backing group. Actually, we always were fairly interested in all the records because being in the business. And he said, they are 4 boys and I'd like to manage them. It wouldn't take any longer than 2 afternoons or 2 half days at a time. It's just a sort of a part-time occupation. He said it would never interfere with business. But the first time we met the Beatles, they were playing in Southport. And Brian was very insistent that we should go over. And I'd never been to a rock and roll concert before, and I asked him what I should wear. and he said, look young, which was a bit difficult.
The best things in life are free, but you can keep them for the birds and bees. Now give me more. What I want, that's what I want. What I want, that's what I want. That's what I want.
What should I say before?
Concerning the Beatles,
Yes, go on.
Brian could show them a way of life they didn't know.
Just let's add a little bit more to that. Provisionally confirming.
He was quite a father figure. And also, he was very determined that they were going to reach the top.
Provisionally subject.
Hello?
Calling for the manager of the Beatles. What is his name? May we have his name, please?
Their manager's name is Mr. Brian Epstein.
Brian Epstein.
Epstein, what was the first name? B-R-Y-A-N-D-R-I-A.
The manager's name is Brian Epstein.
Brian Epstein was introduced to me by a mutual friend who worked for the publishing department. And what had happened was he'd gone in to get a lacquer cut of some of the boys' tapes. And the engineer heard it and thought it was quite interesting. He told the publisher fellow, who rang me up, and said, this guy's been around every record company in London. He's getting nowhere. Would you see him? So I saw him and listened to the tapes, and they were pretty awful, which I understood why people had turned them down. But I thought they were interesting, and I thought interesting enough to see them. So I said, bring the boys down to London and I'll give them a test. I just took it as a fairly normal, routine job. And then when I met them, I liked them, and I thought they were great. I didn't think they would be worldwide hit writers because the songs they'd produced were pretty elementary. Love Me Do was about the best of the bunch. They were very quick learners, you know. After the first couple of years, they knew almost as much about recording as I did. And they were always wanting to experiment, always asking questions.
We did a lot of learning together. He had a very great musical knowledge and background. So he could translate for us and suggest a lot of things, which he did, you know, and he'd come up with amazing technical things, like slowing down the piano and playing it slow and putting it on, and things like that, you know, where we'd be saying, well, can we're on it, go, and e, and he'd say, well, look, chaps, I thought of this afternoon. Last night I was talking to whoever he was talking, and I came up with this, you know, and we'd say, oh, great, I'll put it on here, you know. But he also come up with things like, well, have you heard an oboe? Oh, which one's that? Is this one? Hey, that would be nice. So it was really, we grew together.
It's more fun in the record if there's a few sounds that you don't really know what they are, and only something happens on here, you know. I couldn't tell you what, because we have a special man who sits here and goes like this, and the guitar turns into a piano or something, you know. And then you may say, why don't you use a piano? Because the piano sounds like a guitar.
You know you should be glad. You know it's up to you. I think it's only fair. I convert you to apologize to her because she loves you, and you know that can't be bad.
I remember getting a record called She Loves You in October of 1963. And I played it. I had a record review board. We played 5 records, and we had we would average about 10,000 calls, and they would vote for what record they liked best. Our audience did. Beatles came in 3rd. I then played it for about 2 or 3 weeks, and nothing happened. I did my Christmas show, went away to Miami Beach, you remember, on a vacation. I started putting it on the radio, and all of a sudden, every other record was a Beatle record. Got a call from my program director at WINS and said, hey, you got to come back. I said, why? He says, the Beatles are coming. I said, well, get yourself an exterminator.
TV place now. Stand by and listen to Wins and tell your friends. Tomorrow morning, an exciting morning on Wins' Brad Phillips has the battles of the Beatles. The Beatles take on all the groups in the world. Tomorrow, and your favorites will be represented by vote. Tomorrow night at 7, the Beatles read their own poetry on a documentary, Meet the Beatles. All over the world. Oh, really? Full hour with the Beatles. Tomorrow night from 7 to 8. We ain't written no poetry.
Bobby Soxer is a girl who wears Bobby socks and is the typical teenage girl. And we put the name the Beatles right across the sock because we think that the girls in America are going to want to be associated with the Beatles, and that is certainly evidenced by what you've seen around here in the last day. And distribution of this kind runs into tens of thousands of dozens a week. We can ship these starting Monday, literally. We will put out socks starting Monday, right through our plant. We're in production now. As a matter of fact, we might have jumped the gun a little bit. We've already sold some of these. Nothing's in writing, but they're sold. We have appointments to move on. Now, we're ready to go.
They put down the Beatles when they first came over, said they couldn't sing worth a damn. There was a David Susskind who does a program on people who said good music, you know, and they were talking about it being, you know, junk music and that it wouldn't last. It was a fad. It was something new, something that the establishment couldn't control. It was no longer the Tony Bennett's, Frank Sinatra's, and Nat King Cole's that was controlling the business. It was a bunch of young people. It was a great day to be young, and I think the establishment finally found that out because everybody wanted to be young after that. And the younger clothes, and people sort of decided that if you can't beat them, join them. And I think that's what they try to do. A lot of them look kind of ridiculous doing it, but...
They were an abstraction. They were like Christmas. Whether it was the word, the Beatles, which still is magical, and a conversation stopper, and a thing to eavesdrop on, and a question I'm still pestered about. I mean, I'd rather talk about something else, but So the Beatles, those faces, that time, that music, some people say really it was the music. That was only a part of it. I mean, I only joined because I wanted to be transported away from the world I'd always known. And they represented hope, optimism, wit, lack of pretension, that anyone can do it, provided they have a will to do it. Their capacity for survival impressed people. They just seemed unstoppable. I mean, without anyone getting hurt or dying, it was really the longest running story since the Second World War.
I mean, sort of like a taxi driver the other day had some sheet music of a Mozart thing. And I said, what's that, you know? And he said, oh, I said, oh, that's the high-class stuff. You won't like that. He said, no, you won't like that. And I said, well, what is it, you know? He said, oh, no, you won't like it. You know, it's high-class, that. It's very high-class, highbrow. And that kind of way, I always used to think of it. I used to think, well, you know, that's very clever, all that stuff. And it isn't, you know, it's just exactly what's going on in pop at the moment. Pop music is the classical music of now. People just take our music and, you know, in a line, and we just sort of say, she was just 17. And they read everything into that, you know. She was a 17-year-old nymphomaniac working on the streets of Broadway. But, you know, what we meant is she's just 17. But it might mean all the other as well. I don't know, you know. I've no idea of any Aeolian cadences and, you know, miasmic climaxes and all of that. I mean, we're the last people to know about our songs, because the pop world's never heard the pop world as such, because we can't, you know, it's like if you look at a snapshot of yourself, you're looking at what tie you were wearing, or whether you were looking nice in the snapshot, you know, but anyone else would just take the snapshot and say, oh, that's good, that's a snapshot of Tony, you know. It's like, we really just always think of ourselves as just happy little songwriters, just little rockers, you know, just playing in a rock group. But it gets more important than that after you've been over to America and you've sort of got knighted.
These are the fantastic scenes outside Liverpool Town Hall just after the Beatles arrived. The casualties, they've been put at about 100 by the St. John ambulance men. They're falling like ninepins, the crushed barriers are giving way. Liverpool's never seen anything like this. What's it feel like to come back to a big civic reception like this?
Very nice.
Did you ever imagine that this day was coming?
Never like this.
Now, it's about 7 months since you were in Liverpool last, appearing.
Officially.
Yeah. And some of the fans have been saying that, you know, they feel that you've deserted them. What do you feel about that?
They're mainly the ones that never came to us. The people that are moaning about us not being here are people that never even came to see us when we were here. You know, we could count on our fingers the original fans we had here, the ones that really followed us.
No matter what street you went into in the South End or any working class area, there would be a group practicing in somebody's basement or driving somebody mad in the street. And it all started off from the old washboard groups, the skiffle groups, because it was a way out to release their violence. Instead of going around kicking people to death, they started, you know, to beat a drum to death. And they didn't have to learn the dots. They didn't have to go to a college of music. It was all straight from the heart. And this is, you know, your chance to break away from the poverty that surrounds you. Like in the golden days of boxing, empty stomachs made, they say, the best boxers. It was a sort of working class musical revolution, which boomeranged all over the world later on.
And I was playing folk songs that I'd put a new, like the Mersey beat to, you know. And people weren't going for it. They just didn't really understand where I was coming from with that kind of music. It didn't sound bad, really, as far as I recall. Roger Miller, who later became very popular, right, told me that he liked it at the time. He was on the same bill with the Troubadour. And he said, I know what you're doing, you know, I understand it, but I don't think the audience does, and you shouldn't get angry with them.
Simplify you, classify you, deny, defy, or crucify you. All I really wanna do.
Everybody here was growing long hair. Everybody was trying to do the Mersey beat I remember being led into concerts purely on the merit of having long hair and no instruments cases or anything. Oh, he must be one of them, you know. We were trying to break down the walls and established, it wasn't a bloody gun-firing revolution, but it was more of a feeling of promise for the future that we might be able to stop worrying about bombs and things. As it turned out, there are more bombs now than there ever were, and bigger and better.
My mother and my uncle, Murray, they lived at the beach when they first came to California because they didn't have any money to get a house. They lived in tents on the beach along with thousands of other Depression families. California was the dream world. I think it was the promised land, so to speak. And all the things we sang about were true. They're just reflections of our experiences in our environment.
I love to sing, and I love to play. And the experience of it working, when everybody's doing what they're supposed to do regarding a particular piece of music and it works, it's really a thrill, you know? And it really is, it's a joy. Maybe that is the freshness that gets reflected. The whole thing's a wonder. I mean, I'm sitting here in a room, and we're making a film, you know, and doing an interview, and it started out that we went into a room and sang, you know, and I got on a piece of tape and then was on the radio, and a lot of people heard it and bought it, and we're here to play for people. Now, if that isn't a wonder, I mean, geez, you know, that's a mind blower, isn't it?
Three of them being brothers, and I being their first cousin. The Beach Boys all sang together in a very loose structure. We'd just go over to each other's house and sing around the piano, and all very innocent at the beginning. And we didn't have any grand designs to be quote-unquote rock stars. And that has always been an integral part of our musical philosophy or philosophy of life. It's just the natural expression, uninhibited by stresses and tensions, is joyful and it's happiness.
The Beach Boys, of course, were already successful by the time the Beatles came to America. But the Beach Boys, too, fell under the spell. We had certain panaceas offered to us. The fact that there was an ever-growing us and a dwindling them was another hope that was held out to us. People used to talk about half the population are going to be under 25 in the next 20 minutes. Therefore, everything's going to be fine. There was plenty of money about. The peace movement seemed to be gathering steam. The war in Vietnam had not become what it was later to become. England had still never had it so good. Everyone seemed to be okay.
Jennifer Juniper lives upon the hill. Jennifer Juniper sitting very still. Is she sleeping? I don't think so. And is she breathing? Yes, very low. What you doing, Jennifer, my love? Jennifer Juniper.
It makes me very rich, and I got big dreams because of it. I see all the writers together again, and I see all the painters together again, all together under one roof, influencing each other and making beautiful things, controlling the whole market with all the art. Just how you'd imagine if you sat down, how you'd really like it. That's how we're going to make it. Like Greece, the Parthenon, all the great minds of the world sitting up on top of the world, working it out. Pop music is the beginning, because the pop music is changing the scene anyway. Fashion will change, architecture, eating, everything. Because we want it a certain way, and we're going to have it.
Juniper, hair of golden flags. Jennifer, Juniper, longs for what she likes. Now do you like her? Yes, I do, sir. And would you love her if I could, sir? Oh, what you doing, Jennifer, my love? Jennifer, Juniper, Jennifer, Juniper, oh, Jennifer, Juniper, oh,
And I would talk to a lot of these kids, and what it amounted to is they wanted to live very fast, and die very young, and have a good-looking corpse. That they just had no concern about tomorrow. I want to live today. And you would say things to them like, you know, how old are you? I'm 16. Have you tried, you know, camping out or walking across the bridge? Have you had a child? Have you been married? Have you lived with a woman? Hey, man, you know. And I didn't believe it. That they thought that that was all, those standard things of that humans go through in their lives were passé. That you must experience beyond that. And my whole wonderment was, well, why do you want to do that before you've done this? These are the basics of life. And they were all in a hurry.
And my hands can't feel to grip, and my toes too numb to step. Wait only for my boot heels to be wandering. Hey, Mr. Tambourine.
Jane Fonda's birthday party was actually planned by Peter Fonda, who had seen the Byrds, bought a Byrds album, asked to meet them, seen them somewhere, and became a bird freak, which was in itself very unusual for anyone in movies to know anything about rock and roll. Because he was a short-haired kid then, Peter Fonda. So he wanted to hire the Byrds for his sister's birthday party. And it was my job to make sure that all of the Byrds knew Peter Fonda and that they were properly introduced, and make sure that Henry Fonda was well pleased by everything and not too upset by the appearance of the Byrds. What I hadn't bargained for was that all the Byrds followers knew no rules, that they got high and went anywhere the Byrds went. And they gate crashed the party, looking absolutely terrible for those days. But then they were the freaks. I mean, they were freaks. They smelled of patchouli and hash and grass. And they wore long, flowing things. And they danced up to and around Henry Fonda, who was against the wall, quite astounded by this, quite astounded. What is going on? It was a drinking party. And I was panic-stricken after the whole thing had gone to pieces. First of all, gate crashers were not people you welcome to parties. And I said to Jim Dixon, the Byrds manager, what can we do about this? He said, this is Hollywood. This is new Hollywood. Don't you know what this means to these people? They haven't seen this since the 30s. They want this madness. That's why they've got the Byrds here. This is the beginning. This is where the worlds meet, again.
There is a house in New Orleans they call the rising sun. And it's been the ruin of many a poor boy. In God, I know I'm one. My mother was a tailor. Sewed my new blue jeans. My father was a gambling man down in New.
Power to the people. Music should be free. Flowers in the streets. Trees all over. We did many, many, many shows in the park. 10, 15,000 people would show up every Sunday. One time, I had my son on my shoulder. He was about 2 years old. I walked into the park, and it just hit me that I knew every face that was there. And they were all there, always there, every Sunday. And I started talking to them. I said, hi, dig the show, yeah. What do you do? Hey, man, wait for the Sunday, baby. What do you do? Hey, man, it's far, just wake up, man, and this is a groove. What do you do? I panhandle. Not once, this guy may have worked, this guy, but I'd say 60 to 70%. That was their life.
Hippie happening in the Psychedelic Social Centre. And the beautiful people of London made their flower power way to Beatles, George and John's With It, Aladdin's Cave. Only they call it Apple. It's a new kind of boutique in Baker Street, catering for specialized tastes. George and John described their new venture as a kind of psychedelic Garden of Eden for lovers of hippie gear with all the trappings of beautiful living. After explaining that, George thought he'd take it easy. He was lucky he could find the chair. So he settled back to listen to the latest kind of shop-warming music as played by the group who designed the store. They call themselves The Fool. They thought it was divine, like everything else in the three-story psychedelic supermarket. Cilla Black was among the top shop warmers. So was Kenneth Tynan. There were lots of others we didn't recognize. Sherlock Holmes used to live in Baker Street. Perhaps he could have identified them. But the Beatles found it all very elementary. That's shop business.
It is strange to see pop musicians with sitar. When George Harrison came to me, I didn't know what to think. But I found he really wanted to learn. I never thought our meeting would cause such an explosion. That Indian music could suddenly appear on the pop scene.
I first started in 1950. There was only mono recording for a start, and there was no long players. And tape was just beginning to come in. Everything was done live, of course. The vocal was done along with the backing. But the studio became a workshop. And so I became very much involved in painting pictures with sound, which I think is what recordings are about nowadays. And it's fascinating, really, when you've got a palette of colors of sound at your disposal. You can do what you want with it. You can actually make sound pictures. It's good fun.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to strawberry fields. Nothing is real, and nothing to get hung about. Strawberry fields forever.
John said to me, I've got a song called Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, which is on the Sgt. Pepper album. He said, what I want that to sound like is like a whirligig fairground noise. I want to have a swirling mass of fairground sounds. And what we did there, I organized that he and I both played organs. And I'd overdubbed a kind of swirling chromatic run at half speed. And then, in order to give a background effect, I got lots of steam organ tapes and cut them all up. And then I said to the engineer, fling it up in the air, which he did, and I'll pick up all the bits and join them all together again. And he did that, and I said, let's hear it. And it still sounded too much like organ, so we said, reshuffle them a bit, turn that one round backwards so it doesn't sound quite so much. And then we eventually got a kind of tape that was nonsense. It had no musical shape, but it had the general sounds of a steam organ. And that's how Kite was done.
Mrs. K and H assure the public their production will be second to none. And of course, Henry the Horse dances the waltz.
I always was a record man, you know. I mean, I liked the studio always best once I got the hang of it and the control of it. I like it because it's complete control. So records is what I was hooked on. I remember singing Day in the Life on a guitar and Mal shouting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the breaks, and it's really like that, and taking the picture on the album.
Yeah.
And if you look closely at the album cover, you'll see 2 people who are flying and 2 who aren't. That's just a little in-joke. 2 of them didn't share it with 2 others.
Well, things came to a head eventually in California, in Monterey. And in Monterey, we decided to hold a festival and celebrate all that was being achieved. The idea was to spread music and love and peace and turn everyone on. Turn them onto the good life and the colorful life. To give money away as fast as we could, because we seemed to have plenty of money. If we wanted 100,000 flowers flown in especially from Hawaii, we did. It seemed a good idea at the time. And it was because of that spending power and that willingness, and because we were absolutely chock-a-block with acid, all of us, that it succeeded. But we had order within all that. We weren't just taking drugs all day, but our euphoria was such that we were able to put on a massive festival and bring it off.
Stopped into a church. I passed along the way. Well, I got down on my knees and I pretend to pray. California, on such a winter's day.
There were too many police there, but I mean, they were just transformed by the first half an hour of the show. Once the show started, once the association began to play. 3 days we had them because we were so beautiful and organized and decent, despite the Hells Angels. The Beatles were supposed to be there, and nobody would believe they weren't. The Beatles are here. Somebody said 3 of them are here, dressed as hippies, in disguise. So that was what I announced. It's understood that 3 of the Beatles are here, but we don't know which of them, and they're all disguised. The answer to that is, how do you know that the 3 of them are here if they're all disguised? Which 3? The Beatles were there, of course, at Monterey, but only in spirit, because without them, none of this could have happened. In reality, they were thousands of miles away, preparing to record a song for a TV satellite program. Brian had telephoned me and said, it's their finest. It sounded dramatic, but in a sense it was their finest, because it was all you need is love, which was then what we believed, and maybe still should believe. It was seen and heard by millions and millions of people all over the world. It caused people to say, people who've never really liked the Beatles, that they were among the great treasures. Pop music really never had a finer moment.
Love is all you need. Love is all you need.
But in Monterey, the local people soon reverted. By Tuesday, they all hated us again. They made sure there was never another pop festival in Monterey. Cold, hard bastards. And they made life hell.
8 miles high, and when you touch down, you'll find that it's stranger than known.
We followed up our initial hit record with All I Really Want to Do, another Bob Dylan song, and that got stolen away from us. And the one to follow that was 8 Miles High, and I think that was the one that blew us out of the game because everyone thought it was an LSD promotional song, and in fact, it really wasn't.
You officers that are stationed in front of the stage behind the barricade, you will go to Mr. Morris Shapiro, the first aid man, and he will furnish you with earplugs so as to keep you from having a headache. If he runs out of earplugs, he has got some cotton. You can use that. We have a detention room set up within the Coliseum. Any person that you arrest for ejection will be brought to room D. Is that understood? You will take the names, the addresses, and the telephone numbers. We will not allow any dancing, running up and down the aisle. Is that clear with everybody? Thank you.
And who do you say lied to you?
The police did.
What did they tell you, honey?
They told us they'd come down there.
And they wouldn't let you come down here? Is that anything to cry over?
When you wait 2.5 years, it is.
The Beatles, for a long time, have been able to, because of their tremendous popularity throughout the world, especially with the younger set, have been able to say whatever they wanted to without any regard for judgment or maturity or the wisdom of it. And no one yet has challenged them to any tremendous degree where it might count.
Oh, I still like them, I guess. I mean, I like the way they write, but every time I hear them sing, I can't help but think about what they said. So I guess it sort of hurt people's feelings. Because, you know, everybody thinks so much of them, and speaking for the teenager, and everybody thought they were so good and all that. And then they come up with something like this, and it just seems like they're making fun of everything that we like, so.
Well, originally I was pointed out that fact in reference to England, that we meant more to kids than Jesus did, or religion at that time. I wasn't knocking it or putting it down, I was just saying it as a fact. And it is true, especially more for England than here. You know, but I'm not saying that we're better or greater or comparing us with Jesus Christ as a person or God as a thing or whatever it is. You know, I just said what I said and it was wrong or was taken wrong, and now it's all this.
I've spoken to many of the promoters this morning, and when I leave here I have a meeting with several of the promoters who are not anxious that any of the concerts should be cancelled at all. Actually, if any of the promoters were so concerned and it was their wish that a concert should be cancelled, I wouldn't in fact stand in their way. As a matter of fact, the Memphis concert, which is nearest to the place where this broke out, apparently sold more tickets yesterday than they had done up until that date.
From their appearances and from the conglomeration of colors that they're involved, I couldn't identify them as whether they're actually white or black. I don't have that knowledge. I don't have any knowledge of their involvement in civil rights. The only attitude I could assume that they're interested in one thing, and that's the greenback dollar and what money they could get. If it would be popular to be black, I'm sure they'd consider themselves black. If it's popular to be white, they'd be white. All they're after is the fast buck that they can get.
I'd been home about a couple of days, and Brian, he'd organised a flat for me near to his home. And although I was very sad, I was very thrilled I was going to live near Brian. Brian was going to America the following week. He was doing a TV program. He actually asked me to go with him, and I always regretted this, but I said I felt it was a little soon after his father died, and a friend of the family, who happened to be a doctor, they got in touch with Clive, and they came along and told me. But for those first few, I don't know how long, I was just stunned. Nothing seemed to register at all.
You obviously miss him a great deal still.
Dreadfully, dreadfully.
He sought an exclusivity in his relationships. He didn't like sharing too much. He was the following things: very funny, very romantic, very sensitive to beautiful things. He had other areas in his life which caused him some pain. We never knew where he went at night, and he often seemed to be depressed. He was often lonely, and like a lot of people who seemed to have a full address book, there were times he couldn't always reach people. If he didn't make plans, you know, you can find yourself with an empty evening, and if you're used to a lot of people and nobody answered the phone that night, he would get very depressed and paranoid and think that it was all over. And it was in one of those weekends he died.
John, where would you be today without Mr. Epstein?
I don't know.
Are you driving down to London tonight?
Yes, somebody's taking us down here.
You heard the news this afternoon, I believe.
Yes.
And Paul's already gone down?
Yes.
I see. You've no idea what your plans are for tomorrow?
No, we'd just go and find out, you know. And
just have to play everything by ear.
Yes. I understand that Mr. Epstein was to be initiated here tomorrow.
Yes.
When was he coming up? Was he coming up in the afternoon?
Tomorrow, just Monday, that's all we knew. And he was equally as interested as we are. But he wanted to know about life as much as we do. I spoke to him Wednesday evening, the evening before we first saw Maharishi's lecture, and he was in great spirits.
I understand that this afternoon Maharishi conferred with you all. Could I ask you what advice he offered you?
he told us not to get overwhelmed by grief, and to whatever thoughts we have of Brian, to keep them happy, because any thoughts we have of him will travel to him wherever he is.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. Oh, yesterday came suddenly. Why she had to go, I don't know. She wouldn't say. I said something wrong. Now I long for yesterday. Yesterday, love was such an easy game.